Live, local, social. It's time for the Splash Live, Greater West Bloomfield's news magazine show. On cable, on the web, and all over social media. Featuring stories from close to home, starring people like you. Live from Greater West Bloomfield, it's the Splash Live. Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jake Sheff, bringing you all of the latest news and stories from right here in Greater West Bloomfield. The West Bloomfield Police Department has been lauded for their response to the devastating Temple Israel attack and shooting that took place recently. Several law enforcement officers responded to the danger and faced the challenges head on. It was a taxing day for the department as they worked tirelessly to protect the community. I spoke with one of the officers, Joe Miller, with the West Bloomfield Police Department, to hear his perspective on the attack and what he witnessed firsthand.
I was actually in dispatch when the call first came in and then responded from the station. So we were on scene. I know we had a lieutenant, I believe a sergeant and an officer who were at Shenandoah. So they were the first on scene, and I was within probably 30 seconds of them of getting on scene to the incident. It's kind of, I don't want to say funny, but it's one of those things where we just had active shooter training over like the last couple months. So it's pretty fresh. So a lot of it was being able to see just all the officers. We all kind of just jumped in. The nice thing about it was that you had Temple Israel Security, who by far, these are the ones you guys should really be talking to, because they're the ones who got that initial pin down of the suspect, basically. FBI had did a study of like 51 different like school and mass shootings, and the police response time, the average time is 3 minutes plus. With this incident, you had officers on scene within 45 seconds, and like I said myself, looking back at my video camera and stuff like that, I was on scene within a minute and 15 seconds. So we were on site well below the response time that is a typical response time.
Joe explained to me the canine unit of the West Bloomfield Police Department also played a heavy role in putting their noses to good use in sniffing out the danger.
We ultimately ended up having 20 bomb dogs on scene. I had 4 narcotic dogs on scene that were helping with like security, and then I also had 1 cadaver dog on scene that was helping with the process as well too. So coming out of the building after everything was kind of secured, and just seeing all those dogs kind of showing up, like, okay, like they all were like, I didn't have to tell them what to do. I was like, okay, this is the areas I need taken care of. And they broke off into partners and literally just started doing the work that we needed. Again, the dogs just bring a whole nother aspect that drones can't provide. Other aspects that humans can't provide. Just for the simple fact, just their noses, right? If there's any kind of explosives that had been left or set up or whatever the case may be, they're going to most likely find them before anything else is going to be able to find them.
It was all hands on deck from every single angle of the West Bloomfield Police Department. And Joe Miller explained to me, having gone through devastating situations like this before, he explained why events like this reinforced his decision to become a police officer.
I was one of the few officers when Oxford shooting, when that happened. I was one of the K-9 units that responded to that. So for me to have it happen into my township of where I work and play, it brought back like the importance of training. You know, when you have incidents like this, I've always liked being the one that you have to call, right? In my previous department, I was on the SWAT team, in Pontiac. So I've always done stuff and always trained to kind of be, hey, I want to be that guy that officers say, hey, like this is kind of above our aspect of stuff. So let's partner up with Joe and have him come in and do it. I think just with the growth of law enforcement, with the difference in technology and just policing in general, unfortunately, incidents like this kind of make you still want to keep training, keep wanting to get better, even as an old dog, kind of gray, going over. Like I still want to go and train even that much harder just to make sure that, again, we have turnouts like this. If it's like, hey, if you come to West Bloomfield and do something like this, we have the training that's going to stop you and have 0 casualties.
Well, we thank Joe and every single one of our first responders for the work that they did on that fateful day in West Bloomfield and their continued efforts in keeping the greater West Bloomfield community safe. The West Bloomfield community is mourning the loss of longtime West Bloomfield Library Board member Ken Macon, who passed away this past weekend. Ken served several terms on the library board, including 3 as board president and 4 as the treasurer. Ken is someone who's had a profound impact on the community over the years, especially when it came to expanding young minds with reading and education. I recently spoke with Kathy Russ, the library director for the West Bloomfield Township Public Library, who told me about Ken's impact on making the library what it is today.
He was on the library board for 16 years, and he was on the Friends board prior to that. So he was a big part of the library, the life of the library, I would say for well over 20 years. He was one of the people who were instrumental in getting the bond passed in 1997 so the library could expand. And he was also on the library board when the library won the National Medal in 2010. And that's the highest honor a library can receive. So he was a part of so many things that made the West Bloomfield Library what it is today. He was a mover and a shaker. He got things done, and he just made it such a wonderful place.
Ken has been a key figure in the West Bloomfield Library's success and their impact on greater West Bloomfield. Kathy Russ further went on to explain where Ken's love of reading and education comes from and why he wanted to help the community.
Well, from what I understand from Ken himself, and certainly from Deb, Ken's wife, Ken always loved reading. You know, even when he was serving in the Vietnam War, he had books in his locker and he would read them. And, Deb told me about that and said it was just, he made a point of modeling that behavior for people who were younger than him and, other people in the military to show the importance of reading. I think he really cared about literacy and making sure that kids knew how to read and the importance of lifelong learning in someone's life, and that the library could assist, support, and really be a huge part of that. I think that just seemed to be so much a priority and a value to him that he lived it. He lived it and demonstrated that.
Of course, Ken's impact on greater West Bloomfield extends beyond his work with the West Bloomfield Library. He's been a longtime figurehead in West Bloomfield, and in 2025, Macon was awarded the Jeff Lieb Lifetime Leadership Award at the Michigan Week Community Awards Breakfast, noting his 16 years on the library board and countless other volunteer efforts. Kathy Russ told me Ken's impact on the community, as well as his strong relationship with his wife, Deb.
Ken was that quiet, steady, calm presence that every community needs to serve as the backbone of the community. Like I said, he's the person who doesn't flinch in times of danger. He's there to help, and he's so supportive. And he and his wife, Deb, who is also a mover and shaker and beloved by this community. What a great team. What a great team. He always looked nice. He always had a great shirt or a great sweater, and he looked good in every color. And, every so often I'd say, Ken, that's a great sweater. That's a great shirt. You look great in that color. And he'd say, Deb picked it out for me. I always got to do what she tells me to do. But he would be smiling. It was clear that he adored her. And I think they together and individually have done so much for this community. But together, what a great team.
Quite the dynamic duo. Ken may be gone, but the impact he has had on the greater West Bloomfield community should always be remembered. And Kathy explained to me how she would like Ken's legacy to be honored.
So the West Bloomfield Library is fantastic. They are very supportive of everything that Ken was supportive. Lifelong learning, literacy. They want kids to come in and read. They want the families and caregivers to bring the kids in. But we also have, an adult population, senior population, teen population. The library's for everybody. That's what Ken believed. That's what the library board believes. And they all had an opportunity. Everybody who's on the board currently, I think, had an opportunity to know and work with Ken in some capacity. And just he's such a universally beloved person in this community that I think we'll find ways to honor him, with the wishes of the family, but I'm sure we'll find a really wonderful way to keep his memory alive.
You can hear how much the community truly loved Ken Macon and all of the work he did to make the library and greater West Bloomfield a better place. He will be sorely missed, and we thank Kathy Russ for talking with us here on the Splash Live to share all the wonderful memories of what Ken brought to this community. Today marks the first day of spring in West Bloomfield. The weather's getting warmer and all that snow is starting to melt away for good. That also means that beautiful flowers and greenery are appearing in bloom everywhere you look, even at West Bloomfield High School. They are home to a one-of-a-kind garden that promotes environmental awareness and the love of reading as well. I visited the Literary Garden in West Bloomfield to hear from students and educators on the benefits of learning and growing something beautiful.
So the Literary Garden is a one-of-a-kind in the nation. It's the only one like it. Each flower in the garden is relating to an author that either we read in the school or it's important to people. A lot of the times we get into contact with the authors or their families to ask what kind of flower they would want in the garden. And so it's a great way to connect the history of the arts into gardening in our courtyards.
Oh, so you have worked with some of the artists or some of the authors themselves, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Earlier this year, we actually had Kate Chopin's great-granddaughter come in and meet with some of our classes because they've read some of her books. She's written The Awakening, which our AP Literature class reads, and her great-granddaughter came in and talked about her family history and was able to actually choose a flower that we planted in there.
It makes you just want to know more about how it connects to their story, why they liked these plants, why they had them. So I think it's personally, I've seen these authors in this garden and I've wanted to know more. I've wanted to know more about each and every one of them.
The implementation of this garden has not only fostered a love of reading throughout these kids, but has also helped them to develop a newfound appreciation for the outdoors.
It's really nice to have a community of people who are interested in sustainability and those same environmental factors, because it's something that I'm really passionate about and that I want other people to be passionate about, because I believe that, sustainability and being a part of a community is just really important, especially for the planet. And it's really cool to see how many people are getting involved and getting interested in this club and with sustainability overall.
Jennifer Tynan, the sponsor of the West Bloomfield Gardening Club, spoke with me about what she hopes kids appreciate about seeing this garden and working together to make something beautiful.
The garden is about joy, it's about connection, it's about the importance of our environment, it's about the importance of connecting other human beings in the pursuit of a shared goal. It's about caring for the environment around us, whether that's nature, whether that's the environment in our classroom, no matter where we are, connecting with each other, connecting for the spaces that we're in. It's just helped me to grow and to keep learning and to keep stretching, and I think modeling that for the kids is important, and finding joy and not knowing, being okay not knowing. And I think that's all you can do.
Such a fun, innovative idea for everybody to enjoy, and that garden is only going to get more and more beautiful as time goes on. So big thank you to Jennifer Tynan and the West Bloomfield Literary Garden Club for allowing me to stop by and to see all the beauty firsthand. On Sunday, March 29th, enjoy a wonderful night of music and storytelling at the Berman Center for the Performing Arts. Storied, the Herstory session blends live musical performances with engaging storytelling to highlight the lasting impact of Jewish women in the music industry. The program explores the influence of Jewish female artists, songwriters, producers, and even more who help define music across generations and genres. Joining us on the Splash Live to tell us more is the founder of the Storied Foundation, Benji Rosenzweig. Benji, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Love to have you on. This is such a really fun event that's coming up in a very, very short time, coming up soon in West Bloomfield. Why did you feel the stories of Jewish women in music deserved their own dedicated program?
That's a great question. So this is our 5th show. We've done the Beatles, which this is the shirt I'm wearing. We've done grunge, the Grateful Dead, and reggae. And as I was writing the reggae script for our show in November, I realized that of the about 65 stories that we have in the 4 previous scripts, there were only 6 or 7 that were about women, and some of those were sort of muses or backup singers, and that just didn't feel great. I've got married to a wonderful woman. I've got 2 amazing daughters, and I wanted something more. And so I said, let's make the next show just focused on the Jewish women's contribution and Jewish women's collaboration, and really take a look at the narrative, not as muses, not as backup singers, but as change makers, as the backbone, as the story, not a footnote of the story. And so that's where that came in. And with March being Women's Month, it was perfect to say, let's do this in the spring.
That's right. Give these change makers the spotlight they absolutely deserve. And the Herstory session highlights women from across several different genres and decades. How did you decide which artists and stories to include?
Oh, that was actually really difficult because there's a lot of amazing women in the music scene, both musicians, contributors, business people, and inspirations. And I tried to focus on the stories that had a maximum amount of nostalgia for each of the different generations and genres. And so, really focused on music that will make people smile and give people happy memories today based on wonderful memories from the past. And so we really tried to focus on those stories, and we packed a lot of punch in a very short amount of time.
I'd imagine so. I mean, lots of different artists who many people may not even realize are Jewish. And there's older artists like Carole King, or even newer artists like Pink. Why is it important to connect these artists to Jewish history and identity?
Yeah, it's no secret that the Jewish community is under attack in America and across the world, and it's sometimes taxing. It's emotionally taxing to just be existing in the Jewish community today. And part of Storied, a big part of the ethos of Storied, is to create positive Jewish narratives and share positive Jewish narratives for the purpose of reminding people the good parts about being Jewish, and also for the non-Jewish community who's not only welcome but encouraged to come to the show. These are bridge building conversations, and sometimes it's not even bridge building, it's shining a spotlight on the bridges that already exist so that we can use them more. That's really the purpose of Story. That's the purpose of the show, is to just build community, foster community, create community, and make sure that the community feels good.
That's what it's all about. And Storied blends live music with storytelling. So there's truly something for everybody with this. What does that format allow you to do that a traditional concert or a lecture can't always accomplish?
Well, in addition to all the wonderful music, the storytelling is the opportunity to dive into a narrative and learn and find information that people didn't know and share it with them so that they could take it home with them and move forward with it. So, in talking to people about the show, you mentioned Pink. Most people didn't realize that Pink is Jewish. And, she's a great example of somebody who's not out there necessarily advocating for the Jewish community. She's somebody who's out there just being what we call a mensch, doing a great job and just representing our community well by being who she is, authentic. And I love that. There's a really important piece to that. Other examples that are more commonly known is Amy Winehouse. Most people know that Amy Winehouse was Jewish, and we can have that conversation too and talk about her and her contributions and the change that she made to the style of young women in the early 2000s. She was very impactful. And so we can share these various different stories.
That's right. And Amy Winehouse, one of my favorites. So lots of great artists that you are showcasing with this event. For those just joining us on the Splash Live, I'm talking with Benji Rosenzweig of the Storied Foundation, talking to us about Storied, the Herstory session, which is going to be coming to the Berman Center for the Performing Arts on Sunday, March 29th. Lots to look forward to there. Now, Benji, how do you balance historical storytelling with entertainment so that audiences feel both informed but also emotionally connected?
Yeah, so the format is about 3 to 5 minutes of story and then 3 to 5 minutes of song. So we go back and forth between story and song throughout the night. And, we try to keep the stories sort of high level. We talk about the important pieces. We get into some detail, but I don't have an hour to talk about each story. And for that reason, we actually created a podcast that goes with the show. And we finished up season 1, which was all about the Beatles show, with each episode being one specific story. And then season 2 will be grunge, and season 3 will be the Grateful Dead, and so on and so forth. We'll keep moving through the podcast. But the stories are really high level, and sort of engage in the conversation, tell the story, and then move on to the song. But yeah, we try to keep it informative without putting too much in a short period of time.
I love that. Really sprinkling in a lot of those important messages and those important thoughts for everybody to remember as they're enjoying wonderful music. Now, Benji, what do you hope Jewish audiences in particular feel or reflect on after experiencing this program?
Well, I think the in a single word, the answer is joy. I hope that people come out of this enjoying the experience and feeling a level of connection and appreciation for the music, for the people, for the Jewish community. I think that's the number one goal. The education is important. The nostalgia is important. All of those positive feelings that happens. Bob Marley said, one good thing about music, when you feel it, when you hear it, you feel no pain. Music has that sort of magic spice that gets people going. And I think that this is a great opportunity for people to come together and connect in a positive way. Here in West Bloomfield, we had a pretty horrific event in our community with what happened at Temple Israel last week. And people are hurting. People are looking for opportunities to connect and feel good and just, mend some fences and heal some wounds. And I think that this is a really good opportunity to do so and remember the positives of the Jewish community.
I couldn't agree more, Benji. I hope we see a lot of people out enjoying this wonderful music at the Berman Center. I got a couple more questions before we wrap things up, Benji. What broader message do you hope audiences, whether they're Jewish or they're not, what do you hope they take away about the cultural contributions of Jewish women in music?
Well, the cultural contributions of Jewish women in music, I think, is the backbone of the conversation, and that is Jewish women aren't just, and this is not exclusive to Jewish women. This is women in general.
Right. Our
focus of these stories is Jewish women, but women are not just muses and backup singers or even lead singers. Women have a place at the table of change making, of decision making, of impact, of culture building, of culture changing. Like all of these things, a lot of the music industry and a lot of many industries are male dominated and male focused, and men are the most prevalent in many of those sections. But women have done an incredible job, and it's not just behind every great man is a great woman. There's great women who are leading the charge. And so the focus of this story is really the leading the charge side of things. And so, for example, we're going to talk about Carole King, and Carole King's album Tapestry was a game changer. It's iconic, and there's amazing pieces to that album. But bigger than Carole King's, and it's crazy to say bigger than her album Tapestry, because that album was so monumental. But bigger than that album, Carole King wrote over 400 songs that have been recorded by over 1,000 artists. And, the breadth and depth of that statement is absolutely massive. And being able to dig deep and talk about some of those songs, talk about some of those people who recorded her songs and the change that she made in the lives of those artists and the listeners, it's so much more impactful than just looking at her as Carole King who wrote the album Tapestry. It's a different conversation.
Couldn't agree more. And again, Carole King, another incredible musician, another one of my favorites. I mean, you got a lot of great music you are showcasing with this event, Benji. Last question, real quick. We've heard about what this event is going to be. We've heard some of your past events. Looking ahead, are there other stories or themes within Jewish music history that you're hoping to explore with future programs with Storied?
The answer is yes. I have on my board, I've got 5, 6, 7 stories that I know that I want to focus on, but I got to eat that elephant one bite at a time. And so, we're pacing right now at about 2 new shows a year. So 2024, we did the Beatles and grunge. In 2025, we did the Grateful Dead and reggae. This year, we've got Jewish women, and we're going to announce shortly what we're going to do in the fall. But yeah, we're pacing at about 2 new shows a year.
Well, can't wait to see what else is to come with Storied. This is such a really, really great immersive event. I can't wait to see it, Benji. Thank you so much for joining us today here on the Splash Live.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope to see you at the show.
Of course. Once again, March 29th at the Berman Center for the Performing Arts. That is where you can see Storied, the Herstory event, and to hear these incredible stories and songs firsthand. March is National Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month, bringing attention to one of the most common motor disabilities in childhood. The month promotes early diagnosis and intervention, which can significantly improve outcomes for children. Here to provide some insight is pediatric neurologist Daniel Arndt. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you with us. Very, very important conversation. Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. What does that mean to you personally and professionally?
Well, first of all, I think it's a great opportunity just to bring awareness back to cerebral palsy. Every March, you get the opportunity to do that. But I think in that opportunity too, it's not so much just bring awareness to it, but just more so, helping correct misconceptions, helping families get what they need done, and just bringing awareness to the condition that it's out there. And it is something that's very commonly experienced in families, and just help families get what they need.
Couldn't agree more, especially this month where we're really trying to promote as many ways to benefit these families as possible. Why is it important for communities to actively recognize and support cerebral palsy awareness efforts?
Well, it goes beyond just the advocacy of being aware of the condition too, and I think a lot of these families, have challenges that we wouldn't normally expect to encounter in our lives. So, for example, there's challenges with access, there's challenges with getting services, there's challenges with, getting to where they need to be as a family. So I think there are great opportunities to expand that access, make sure that, our workplaces, our schools, social activities, we all have equal access for the kids to get in there and do their things and provide opportunities for them that we might not normally think of, in our everyday life for kids that don't need special accommodations.
That's right. Now, you are a pediatric neurologist, so you know quite a bit about cerebral palsy. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about cerebral palsy that maybe most people aren't aware of or that you'd like to correct?
That's right. So one of the biggest misconceptions is with cerebral palsy, there's an implication that you might have some cognitive impairment. And really, it's important to note that cerebral palsy classically just means some challenges with movement, more so than anything else. So it's not a one-to-one relationship. There are many people that just have challenges with cerebral palsy in terms of motor dysfunction and zero cognitive impairment. So I think that's just one distinction off the bat that's very important to note. And so if somebody tells you that they have cerebral palsy, they might just need some help with movement, whether it's a limb could be too stiff or might be dealing with some low muscle tone. Those are just some very simple, easy things to be aware of, one easy thing to be aware of right off the bat.
That's right, and things can be very different depending on the person when it comes to cerebral palsy. How have you seen cerebral palsy affect each child differently, or what are some ways it can be different?
Yeah. So cerebral palsy itself, just classically, people would expect that to represent some challenges with muscle tone, trouble moving around. And when you break that down, there are multiple different types of movements that people can have challenges with in cerebral palsy. Sometimes it is one side of the body. Sometimes it is both sides of the body, arms and legs that are too stiff, or what we call hypertonic. Sometimes both sides of the body or the whole body is having too little muscle tone. Their muscles aren't strong enough to accomplish what they need to do. More classic in younger kids until they get a little bit older. And then sometimes people with cerebral palsy have some challenge with, you might see their extremities being a little bit wavy, something we call ataxia. Or some children might have difficulty, they might have relatively normal muscle strength or tone, but they actually have difficulty coordinating their muscles, whether it's their arms or legs, to do things. And so there are multiple different types of motor manifestations you'll see with cerebral palsy. And not only can you see different types, but in how they look in the body, but there's also many different causes. So it can be something as simple as an early brain injury during pregnancy or shortly thereafter birth. But sometimes there are neurogenetic conditions that don't actually even have a specific brain structural injury, but it globally, and it is felt to be more of a neurogenetic reason or something that influences the brain to cause the rest of the body to have a little bit low muscle tone or a little bit high muscle tone. So, and there are many different neurogenetic causes. Sometimes there's even neurometabolic disorders that can cause it as well. So it's just important to know that there are many different causes for cerebral palsy, and it can have many different motor manifestations. But the underlying theme is that there are some challenges with moving around.
That's right, and a lot of important information for parents and families to be aware of if they detect something like this in their own child. For those just joining us on the Splash Live, I'm talking with Daniel Arndt, a pediatric neurologist. We're having discussion about National Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month, which is taking place all throughout the month of March, and things for parents and families to be made aware of. Now, when it comes to something like cerebral palsy, Daniel, why is early diagnosis and intervention so critical for children?
Well, it certainly can increase the course of the disorder. So oftentimes in a pediatric neurology clinic, we might see children who are brought in for delays. They're having some difficulty moving. It gives us an opportunity to get in there and figure out what's actually causing the delays. And I think we'll talk a little bit more specifically about motor delays in this setting. But you sometimes can even have difficulties with hearing or seeing. And so when we evaluate a patient in clinic, it gives us the opportunity to do our neurologic exam, find out what the challenges are, make some great recommendations for a patient on how to figure out what's exactly causing those challenges. Is it something structural in the brain, or is it something structural in the spinal cord, or is it something neurogenetic that could be driving this? And once we get in there and make those diagnoses, it enables us to help set up a clear treatment plan. And a clear treatment plan for a patient that has cerebral palsy likely includes some therapies. And there are numerous therapies to get involved for a patient, whether it's physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and there are other little specific therapies you can offer too. And so by getting these therapies involved early, oftentimes our therapists are fantastic, really have improved over the decades I've been practicing. And so a decade plus I've been practicing. And, it really gives them the opportunity to strengthen tone, to correct tone, to work with tone that might not be working correctly. Muscle groups are offsetting each other, and get people back to a functional life. And it's not always just the gross motor tone you got to work with. Sometimes it's the fine motor tone. And our occupational therapists, our speech therapists, coordinating voice and structure and cadence, they really do an excellent job of getting kids, or even adults as they get older, back into their normal groove of functioning. And that's going to really help determine their overall outcome in life.
I absolutely agree. A couple more questions before we wrap things up, Daniel, because we want to make sure we have information out there about these resources to help these kids. What local or national resources are available for families navigating a cerebral palsy diagnosis?
Well, fortunately, Google or ChatGPT are going to give you a wide range of organizations available for cerebral palsy, action groups and support groups and systems. But, really you just want to focus on the larger national groups first. And then once you get some great information, because the websites are fantastic, once you get to the larger groups and you've really kind of navigated some knowledge of the subject and what options are out there, then there's a whole bunch of smaller groups through you're going to find through the internet or through Facebook or other things that can help you relate. And one important thing just to note really quick too is that if you do identify a specific cause for the cerebral palsy, it's very important to realize that there are support groups typically for specific causes, and it can be as specific down to a specific gene that might be causing a cerebral palsy pattern for a whole group of kids across the country or the world. And you really want to reach out to those support groups too to find out what actively might be great for each child with a specific disorder.
Lots of ways you can help. And Daniel, last question, what can everyday residents do to maybe help raise awareness and make a meaningful impact during this month and beyond?
Well, I think not only is it just the simplicity of making people more aware that cerebral palsy is a fairly common condition. Over 500,000 kids across the country have it and more into adulthood. So that number rises. But not only is it just increasing awareness, but just taking a look at your surroundings. So whether you're at work or at social activities, you just want to make sure that entryways, restrooms, opportunities where kids can have fun with other kids are going to be able to be accessed by kids with cerebral palsy of all types. I mean, whether it's a really more prominent situation where a wheelchair needs to fit in, or even just a walker or other gait, that might not just be classically following a straight line like other people or kids can get into. You want to increase access to things. And so just being aware of access. And I think as people who own businesses or work at businesses or hospitals, jobs, work at schools, you're able to take a quick look around and be like, yeah, can every child get through this? And so I think that's very important, number one. But number two, I think we just want to make sure that we're advocating for all kids to get the therapies that they need. So I think a lot of people have opportunities to make that possible. We want to make sure that kids have access to physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and they're getting these things through school and outside as best they can.
Of course, we want to help these kids in any way that we possibly can. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today here on the Splash Live.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me, and thank you for bringing awareness to cerebral palsy. It's fantastic.
Of course, March is Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. We want to make sure that people get this information, know what to look for, and know to help these families if they know someone who is struggling or know someone who has a family member who is struggling with cerebral palsy. So we really appreciate Daniel Arndt for joining us here on the Splash Live. All week long, we have been promoting the local author fair in West Bloomfield, taking place on Sunday, March 22nd at the West Bloomfield Township Public Library. Several local authors will be at this year's event, including someone who's taken her experiences with dentistry and used them to create a wonderful children's book, My Wiggly Smile, Olive's Stubborn Little Tooth. That author joins us now on the Splash Live, Dr. Amira May Woodruff, co-owner of Caring Smiles Family Dentistry. Amira, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, we've had you on a couple times before to talk about your work with dentistry. This is the first time we've had you on to talk about your work as an author. How did your career as a dentist influence your decision to write this amazing book?
Yes, well, I mean, every day I would be at the office and I would see patients, and my littlest patients, I would always try to think of a book that I could recommend to their parents that could be fun for them. And all I could think of was my favorite book growing up, which is the Berenstain Bears Visit the Dentist book. But I couldn't think of a modern one that I really loved enough to recommend. So I just eventually one day said, you know what, I'm just going to write one myself.
All right, I love it. And quick note, just make sure everyone is aware it's Berenstain, not Berenstein. So don't let the
Yes.
Mandela effect trick you there. But this is so great. And I'm curious, what inspired you to explore these other creative outlets alongside your professional work as a dentist?
Yes, well, one thing you may not know about me is I'm also an actor. So I have a lot of creative energy. I do consider dentistry to be a creative science, but just in general, I have a lot of creative energy. And I was actually on a television set one day, and there's a lot of creative energy on set, so it's really inspiring, but there's also a lot of downtime. And so this was like around 2017, and I had written my first version of the manuscript for the book many years before that. But I thought to myself, this would be a good time to really take it seriously and see what I could do with it. And so I used all that downtime, completely rewrote it on set. And then shortly after that, got an editor and then published.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like it was a very long process to go from idea to having this book become a real thing. Is that correct?
Yes, for me, it was very long. And a lot of it was self-doubt because I'm not a writer, I'm a dentist and an actor. But I just figured if anyone, even if one person could be inspired by it or enjoy it or make them less scared about going to the dentist, then it would be worth it. And so I just did it. But yes, it did take a long time for me because of all the breaks in between the steps.
Well, I am curious because I'm sure as you're working your job as a dentist, you probably saw a lot of inspiration through maybe some of your patients and through maybe some of the common fears or experiences that they experienced. Did you notice any of that motivated you to write some stuff into this book?
Absolutely. So the main thing, because the book is about losing a first tooth, kids are always so excited to have a first loose tooth, so excited. To the point where sometimes they'll come in and they're like, can you just take it out so the tooth fairy can come? So that was really inspiring. But also one of the things I was surprised by is a lot of parents are squeamish about seeing a loose tooth on their child. I was very surprised by that. But because of that, I actually included in the back of the book a chart for kids to keep track of the teeth as they're losing so that parents and the kids know how many more teeth are lost. A lot of parents are also surprised by how many teeth to expect to come out. And the number is 20. They're also surprised by how long it takes, like in years, before all the teeth are gone. And so there's also a chart that tells them when to expect to lose each tooth. So that way parents know and the kids know. And I just feel like knowledge about one's body is empowering, and that's for the kids and for the parents.
I love that. For those just joining us right now on the Splash Live, I'm talking with Dr. Amira May Woodruff, one of the co-owners of Caring Smiles Family Dentistry, who will be one of the feature authors at the local author fair with the West Bloomfield Township Public Library on Sunday, March 22nd. Now, we've seen a lot of people write books about going to the dentist before. You just mentioned the Berenstain Bears, but you yourself are a dentist. So I'm curious, how does that really help to influence the direction of this book as a dentist writing this story as opposed to authors writing stories about the dentist?
Well, I definitely think it helps coming from a truthful place, seeing what I see every day with kids. I know what excites them. I know what makes them nervous. And also she goes to the dentist in the book. So it comes from a very truthful place because it's my everyday life. But actually for me, the most interesting things about all books is really the feeling you get while you're writing, the relationships that resonate with you within the story, and then the themes that you might think about later on. So my favorite parts of My Wiggly Smile is actually not really about the teeth. It's the diversity in the book. It's the special relationship she has with her family members and her friends. And then also there's all the stereotypical gender roles are flipped in the book. And none of these things are mentioned in the book. It's just there because they should all be normal things. And that's actually my favorite thing and has nothing to do with teeth.
I love that, showcasing many different things with this book. And I'm curious, what are you most excited about sharing with readers and families at the West Bloomfield Local Author Fair coming up soon?
Oh, I'm just most excited to see people who are just love the joy of reading and books and storytelling and getting to dive into a book and just have your imagination run wild. Those are all things I loved growing up. I still love reading. And so I would assume everyone coming is just has that shared connection of the love of storytelling and reading stories and learning about different worlds that way.
I think so, and there's going to be so many wonderful authors there, so there's plenty of books for everybody to check out. Amira, last question before we let you go. What advice would you give to other professionals who want to explore creative passions outside of their primary careers?
just go for it. Just do it. I feel like the only thing people ever regret is not trying. And I think also we're all multidimensional people, and the everyday grind of life, it's easy to forget that. But you'll never regret going for something that you really enjoy doing. And so I just say, go for it. I did.
Go for it. It's that simple. We want to see everybody exploring what they want to do. Amira, thank you so much for joining us today here on the Splash Live.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, once again, Sunday, March 22nd from 1 to 4 p.m. at the West Bloomfield Township Public Library. You can check out Amira and all of the other wonderful authors that we've had on the show in the past few days at this event, hear from them firsthand, and to check out their amazing books. As the greater West Bloomfield community continues to recover from the devastating attacks on Temple Israel, praise is being brought upon our local law enforcement and first responders for their quick and effective actions during the attack. This extends to our local fire department as fire crews arrived within minutes of the crash to combat the blaze ignited by the suspect's vehicle ramming the hallway. Their rapid intervention prevented the fire from spreading to the Early Childhood Development Center. Joining us now on the Splash Live to tell us more from the fire department's perspective is Blake Belsky with the West Bloomfield Fire Department. Blake, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Jake. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, obviously wish that this were under a lighter topic, but we do want to hear your perspective from this day in West Bloomfield. And Blake, the 911 call came in at about quarter after noon when your team arrived and saw the smoke billowing from the front entrance. What was the first priority for the fire and EMS units regarding the children that were still inside the building?
Well, luckily, our fire and EMS crews, they are familiar with the building. They're familiar with the folks who use that building day to day. And combined with the information that was available from our dispatchers at the time, we didn't even need to wait until we got on scene to start thinking about what our first actions were going to be. I'm sure our crews that were racing there were thinking about who's inside, how do we get them out safely, how do we shelter them in place, if that's going to be the most important thing. And then once they got on scene and obviously confirmed that there was in fact a fire in the building, they know it's time to get to work. And the biggest concern is how do we keep everyone safe with such a complicated incident with fire and the criminal activity that led to the fire starting in the first place.
I'd imagine it would be a lot of chaos dealing with a situation like this, especially with so many students, 104 students that were inside the building. What were the immediate safety risks that you had to mitigate in that situation?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that the kids and the staff, all the occupants of the building, make sure that they stay safe. In some cases, maybe it's going to be a shelter-in-place situation. Maybe the safest thing for them to do is to stay exactly where they are. And that could be different based on where they were located in the building. This is a decision that our crews have to make in real time with the information that they have available. And sometimes the information changes. Once we found out that the fire was, contained where it was, they've got a fantastic sprinkler system that contained that fire. The smoke was the biggest issue. But then it became an issue of once we know they're protected from the fire, how do we protect them from the attackers? However many there were, we didn't know at the time if there was one attack, 2, 3 people involved. We didn't know if there were explosive devices that were going to be deployed at some point. So it became an issue of how do we make sure that these people stay safe no matter where they are, and make sure we take action for that.
That's right. Obviously, there were a lot of unknowns at that situation, that information that we didn't know now, that we know now that we did not know at the time. So that obviously probably caused a bit more chaos and worry as you were navigating this situation. Now, dealing with 100 toddlers and preschoolers and keeping them calm, that's a tall order no matter the situation. As an EMS coordinator, how did you keep these toddlers in line and keeping them, and as you're moving them through an active, high-intensity crime scene?
I'd love to be able to take credit for keeping these kids calm, but all of that credit goes to the staff. We were very fortunate to have their teachers, their caregivers, and eventually their parents at the reunification center across the street. The folks who know the kids and the folks that the kids know and are comfortable around, they're the ones who were able to keep them calm. In spite of all of the feelings and emotions that they were experiencing, they were able to, set those aside, deal with them later, but not only keep the kids safe, but keep them relatively comfortable in a very strange situation. You can imagine any change in a routine for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old is going to be a big event. Dragging them out of their classroom in a chaotic situation where there's obviously a fire, there's obviously something amiss, dragging them outside without their coats and taking them to an entirely new location and having to figure that out. The fire department, the police department, none of the responders can take credit for keeping these kids calm. All the credit goes to the staff of Temple Israel and the staff at Shenandoah Country Club for keeping them sheltered and fed the whole time.
That's right. It was a community effort all throughout Greater West Bloomfield, with Shenandoah and Temple Israel's team also coming to the aid of these kids. Now, talking about the staff at the Early Childhood Center, they had just completed active shooter training back in January. How did their discipline and lockdown procedures make your job easier as you move the kids to safety?
I mean, obviously, the first thing we noticed is that the kids were safe when we got there. That is a credit to the training that teachers went through, that they paid attention and were able to put those lessons to practice. I don't think any of us who have to go through active shooter training, whether it's as a responder or as just a member of the community, school teachers and people that work in offices, none of us ever go through that training and think, oh, this is something I'm going to need next week. Thank goodness that these teachers went through the training and learned from it. We had teachers who had their go bags full of supplies, evacuation instructions, first aid supplies in case that they needed it, in case someone got injured, leaving the building, let alone from the attack. And everyone was prepared, and it showed. They did a fantastic job. I can't say enough good things about them.
For those just joining us on the Splash Live, I'm talking with West Bloomfield Fire Department EMS Coordinator Blake Belsky, who's talking about the fire department's response to that harrowing attack on Temple Israel that took place recently. And Blake, what I remember from that day, there was a ton of police and fire units out on that site, roughly 80 units, to ensure the path from the building to the transport vehicles was secure. Can you describe that human shield or the perimeter that was established by these law enforcement officers?
Well, one thing about law enforcement, when they hear that something bad is happening, they don't even wait for an invitation. They start showing up in droves, and that was apparent to anyone who saw any of that footage or happened to be on scene. There were hundreds of police officers ready to help. And once we had the actual threat contained, the next thing became to make sure that students and staff were able to evacuate safely. And so we put those hundreds of officers on scene to work, making sure that those students were protected. Again, with these attacks, I use this term seriously, these terrorist incidents, we don't know until the incident is over if there's one attacker, two attackers, if there's going to be devices in the parking lot that are going to cause harm as evacuation occurs. So the priority becomes getting them to a safe environment and making sure they transport there safely. And part of that is putting the people with eyes who know what to look for and have some shield, some protective armor that they can move these kids safely. Put them in the way, in between the kids and any potential harm. And we were lucky to have no shortage of officers on scene prepared to do that work.
That's right. It was great to have all of these officers on scene during this situation. Now, the decision was made to move the children to the Shenandoah Country Club for reunification. What were the logistics of that transport while Walnut Lake Road was effectively a parking lot for emergency vehicles?
Well, we had some luck as far as Shenandoah being in such close proximity to Temple Israel. The folks that had to come over there on foot, it didn't take a whole lot of time. We had some other folks that evacuated to a home in the neighborhood behind Temple Israel, as a matter of fact. And I believe they were picked up by a bus and brought over to Shenandoah so that we had all of the evacuees in one spot for reunification. Moving any vehicles, buses, personal vehicles, even emergency vehicles through a sea of hundreds of police cars and fire trucks and ambulances does become a bit of an issue. We had lots of folks that were ready to move cars as needed, whether it was the police officers moving their own vehicles. Some of those police officers were busy and couldn't give us their keys, so we did have tow trucks on site ready to just scoot cars out of the way as needed so we could clear a path for other arriving emergency vehicles, buses that are performing evacuations, and ultimately for the families to be able to leave and go home safely.
Wow, that is a lot to navigate for these kids and for anybody who was at Temple Israel and at that scene that day. Now, Blake, as a first responder, you're trained for the technical side of this, but what was the atmosphere like at the reunification site the moment those kids were finally handed back to their parents?
Oh, well, I'd love to say I have more experience and more training with family reunification, but this was my first time. I was asked by Chief Lowry to set up family reunification efforts at Shenandoah, and thank goodness Shenandoah. I mean, you want to talk about the hospitality business? They have gone above and beyond what anyone could have expected from them in this community. So proud of what they were willing to do and what they were able to do for us. We pretty much commandeered a ballroom for family reunification, and we made sure that it kind of became a de facto preschool again. We took attendance. We had classrooms kind of separated so that we could find people easily as parents came in. And we had, again, plenty of law enforcement to help us sign parents in, make sure nobody leaves with a kid that they aren't supposed to leave with and that we didn't know was leaving. Everyone was super cooperative. And again, we could not have done this without the help of Shenandoah and without the cooperation and the assistance from all of these staff and teachers at Temple Israel. It was as good as we could have hoped for.
I imagine so. Big team effort from everybody. Blake, we are running short on time. I got one more question before we wrap things up. Looking at the damage to the building and the intensity of that fire, how proud are you of the fact that every single student and staff member made it out without a single physical injury?
It's incredible. It's incredible. And again, we would love to take credit for it, but this was absolutely a partnership. This was a huge credit to the training of our first responders, the training of everyone at Temple Israel, and the training and cooperation from the community. If we hadn't had folks keeping Walnut Lake clear and trying to get through the neighborhoods, we couldn't have done this as smoothly as it worked out. So thank you to everyone in the community for your support, your cooperation, and we hope we never have to do this again.
I couldn't agree more to that. And Blake, we thank you for the work that you, the fire department, and all of our first responders did in protecting West Bloomfield that day, navigating through the chaos, and keeping everybody safe. Thank you so much for joining us today here on The Splash Live.
Thank you, Jake. Have a great weekend.
You as well. Great work from all of our first responders, from our law officials, from everybody in West Bloomfield, from that devastating day at Temple Israel. I mean, thankfully, things did not get worse than they were, but it was a huge thanks to the law enforcement teams for everything that they did in protecting this community. That's going to do it for us today here on The Splash Live. Big thank you to all of our guests and for everybody on the Splash Live team for making this show possible every single day. I've been your host, Jake Schaff, live, local, social. It's The Splash Live on Civic Center TV.